Hello and welcome back to a very small bite-sized episode of Scott's Big Mouth. Now, this is one I wasn't intending to make. It's early New Year and wanted a bit more positivity in the world in general. But I was contacted on Friday by a very nice and helpful chap. I'm not going to give you his name because he may not want it out there. And he told me to watch GB News on Saturday at between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock. So just gone. I was out with Wanda at the time. I screen recorded the conversations that were had, and I thought it really important to be able to share across all of our social media, predominantly mine, the importance of what was said on GB News. Not a massive GB News fan, Good Morning Britain fan, any of that, but what this subject is about it's so important, and it's a child maintenance service. The good old child maintenance service, directly responsible for 1,000 male deaths every year, directly attributable to the child maintenance service. And within this video, I've screen recorded it. I'm going to put it on the end of this so you can hear what was said. I didn't catch the guy's name, I do apologise, but he's on about the accounts that have just been published for 2022 to 2023 for the child maintenance service, and the adverse accounting opinion. Basically, arrears that people don't fucking owe. And it actually adds up to £196 million. And they've called it an aggregate total of outstanding arrears, and basically fictional arrears. I've been through it. I was told, my ex-wife told them I hadn't paid a penny when bank records stated I had. That took me, I don't know, 2-3 months to get sorted out. They could put you on a direct a deduction of earnings order. They could take money directly from your account, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they've also said that the way that they run makes further errors likely. This is a government body, right? A government body that is torturing and terrorising predominantly, and I'm well aware that this isn't all one way, but predominantly dads in this country. Within the video shared by GB News, you're going to hear two stories. One from Jo Smith about her brother Johnny, who took his own life through the harassment and just bullying and horrific nature of the child maintenance service. And you're going to hear a heartfelt, and I defy anybody in this world, mother or father, to not be brought to tears by the story of Ian Briggs and his son Gavin. There's a website, Justice for Gavin Briggs. Go and read it. It's just the emotion in Ian's voice and face, even this many years on, is horrendous. And when you hear what the CMS were accountable for, it will blow your mind. Hopefully this month I've been put in touch with somebody that's going to come on to the Scott's Big Mouth, and he's going to tell you his story. He's going to tell you how the child maintenance service have bullied and harassed him. I'm well aware there are thousands and thousands of stories out there like these guys. If you have a story, please send it to me, scottandwandasworld@yahoo.com. Very, very interested to see what I pay £306 for a month for a son I don't see. The child maintenance service actively rewarding criminals. I have an active court order that she ignores, and they reward her for it. Incredible. It's an incredible service, and something needs to be done. I'm hoping this is going to go out today. I've just been sent a WhatsApp message saying It's in everyone's interest to watch GB News tonight at 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock. It's the 2nd of January today. So please, if it's something that interests you, go. Even if you don't like GB News, at least they're covering this subject. With that in mind, I'm going to pass over to the GB News stuff and let me know what you think in the comments. It's a scandal and it needs to stop, and it needs to stop quickly.
For 2022 and 2023 from the National Audit Office about the Child Maintenance Service. And when you read it, it's quite extraordinary. There is what's called an adverse accounting opinion, which basically means it can't be signed off as a true and fair record. Just listen to this. And I think we've got this on the screen. The aggregate total outstanding maintenance arrears balance is £196 million. Absolutely extraordinary. As at March 23, these balances are misstated as a result of a number of factors, most significantly due to errors in the historic underlying assessment calculations and adjustments to arrears balances in preparing this account that makes further errors likely. Now, I mean, that is really significant, £196 million. The consequences of that, individual cases will, of course, vary. Some might be small, some might be very large. But if individuals actually are constantly faced with arrears, errors that are way too high, then the tension, the pressure, the inability to pay when it's directly taken out of your wage packet is huge. And I'm joined in the studio by two people who've had family members who've tragically taken their own lives because of the pressures from these arrears from the Child Maintenance Service. Joe Smith and Ian Briggs, welcome to the studio. In a sense, with the greatest respect, I'd rather we weren't having this discussion because, Joe, you lost your brother, Johnny, and Ian, you lost your son, Gavin. Can we just talk, Joe, to you first?
Yep.
About Johnny, just the circumstances, sort of what happened, first of all, and then what you'd like to learn from this.
Yeah, okay. He's struggled for years with the Child Maintenance Service. You can see throughout his records, his transcripts that we were lucky enough to get hold of, how frustrated he was. I think where it all started to go wrong was when it changed from the Child Support Agency over to the Child Maintenance Service. So he had a private arrangement in place to start with, where he paid cash. Evidence of that, a phone call that the CSA held, was lost when it went over to the Child Maintenance Service. Now, he couldn't prove that that arrangement had been in place. And as I look back through the telephone records, he's constantly asked to provide proof that he's paid cash.
Yeah.
That's impossible to do. You can prove you've been to the bank at certain times, but you can't prove where it's gone. So there was that added arrears. Then all of a sudden, I think it was £4,230 landed on his account that were arrears, which obviously then inflated his monthly payments. They were then retracted later down the line because the CMS said, "Oh, sorry, we put these on in error." And he questioned, "Well, where's that money that I've paid?"
So he was challenging the numbers,
Yep.
questioning it, wasn't getting the right answers. And tragically, it became too much for Johnny. And
I think the calculations as well. So I think they did 3 assessments in 1 year. One was based when he had a lot of overtime after he'd been furloughed, and then that kind of projected his income for the next 12 months, which was way higher than what he was actually on.
So he. What would you like to see, Joe, as we talk about these issues? What would you like to see the lessons learned from the CMS?
I'd like people to be able to challenge and get through to the CMS. So they were taking illegally over 40% of my brother's wage.
So this point about the challenge, Ian, I think it's really significant. You tragically lost your son, Gavin. Just the circumstances of Gavin and the CMS.
So the first thing I knew about it was Gavin never came home on Wednesday, the 1st of July, 2020. We spent 3 days waiting to try and find him, and the police found his body on the evening of the 3rd of July. It wasn't until I started going through his paperwork that I knew why he took his own life. And in going through his paperwork, I discovered that he had dealings with the CMS. Now, the CMS assessed Gavin, and they carried out assessment on him. He was a trained mechanic, and he earned about £50,000 a year income.
And they over-assessed his income?
Yeah, the CMS inflated his income by 50%.
And coming back to Joe's point about the challenge, Ian, was he able to challenge this?
He challenged it. I know he challenged it twice, and the CMS wouldn't listen to him. So when he got the final third assessment, basically the CMS were going to be taking £2,669 off of Gavin a month in child maintenance, leaving him roughly about £150 a month to survive on.
And so it became tragically too much for Gavin. So what would you like to see sort of come out of this? What, going into the new year, what's got to happen?
There's got to be a public inquiry into the CMS, the way it operates. It cannot carry on taking people's lives the way it does. Nobody should have to go through what I've gone through.
I know. I can hear the emotion in both of your voices.
And we know that we lose thousands of people a year. The statistics are out there that say we lose approximately 1,000 people a year to CMS, to suicides. As a paying parent, the mortality rate is 14% higher than the national average.
It's heartbreaking, and there's a serious issue about this challenge because, as I understand, if the Secretary of State issues a liability order to anybody, then actually that cannot be challenged, even if it's proven to be incorrect. Yeah. It can't be challenged in court.
No, they're not able to challenge the numbers in court.
Which seems completely against the sort of the rules of natural justice.
Yeah, there is no justice.
No.
You know, it's the judge is not allowed to see what calculations the CMS has carried out to enforce that liability order. So how can the judge make a fair statement, make a fair judgment on the liability order?
That just seems completely wrong to me. It seems just against all rules of natural justice. Look, again, thank you so much for sharing such a difficult, sensitive issue with us and our viewers. We will no doubt get lots of responses from viewers on this issue. After the break, we'll be in the news. I'll read out a statement from the Department of Work on pensions. In fact, I've just got it now. Child maintenance payments, they help around 160,000 children out of poverty. Each year, we continue to improve the CMS through automating simple processes and spending more time with the vulnerable customers. And CMS payments are calculated so they're reasonable and affordable for paying parents. Decisions can be appealed, they say. Well, that I don't think is always the case. So these are big, important issues. Hearing from Joe and from Ian, it can end up in absolute tragedy. Thank you very much to both of you for that. Lots more coming up after. Aaron, thank you very much indeed. It's just after 1 o'clock. Well, I've already got your audience reaction, both on the honours list, but also that extraordinary segment there where we heard from the CMS campaigners, Ian Briggs and Joe Smith, about the importance of getting the numbers right. They tragically, Ian lost his son, Gavin, and Joe lost her brother, Johnny. It was powerful stuff. We could have talked about it for an hour, but let's just get some of your thoughts here. Segment. John says, in November 2020, I had almost £20,000 taken directly from my bank account for fictitious child support agency arrears dating back some 20 years to 1999. I'd kept all of the original documents, but the CMS ignored this, which left John suicidal. Stacey, coming back to this segment, says, I've got a fictional arrears story of over £45,000, never accepted the evidence, and Stacey believes that it's a corrupt service. Hamis says the CMS have created a false calculation of over £7,000 for a period of time for Hamis's son, taking an extra £100 a month, and they collected and paid simply because the father challenged the arrears. I mean, these are significant stories, and some of you will have been, no doubt, affected by this, or if you know friends who've been affected, there is actually a dedicated website and Ian and Joe, they support this service called CMSsuicidewatch.org, and we'll put that strap up throughout the rest of the show from time to time if you want to get in touch, if you've been affected or know people who would benefit from some support and help on that. So my panel is back with me: Paul Scully, Conservative MP, Matthew Stadlin, political commentator. This is not an issue that is very often discussed. I'll come to you first, Matthew, but I mean, desperate. You could hear the emotion in both of Ian and Joe's voices. Look, we all want our public services to do well. I guess what this highlights is there are some areas where actually the importance of getting it right and the ability to check and double check is so critical.
I mean, no one watching that, and Paul and I were watching that in the green room with some of the relatives of Ian and Joe. No one watching that could remain untouched by the horror of it and the tragedy of it and the sadness of it. And more power to their elbows for bringing this to wider attention, and also credit to you, Richard, for discussing it. These are really, really important stories to tell, and it terrifies me that the state is capable of getting it wrong as badly as it seems to have done in these cases, and we need a far more rigorous approach to making sure that this simply doesn't happen again. And it sounds to me that this is the tip of an iceberg and that a lot of people are affected by it. And Mel Stride, who's the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, needs to get a grip on this very, very urgently.
Because you've got the National Audit report there. I mean, to have an adverse opinion in the auditor's report, almost £200 million as at March 2023, basically because of errors, not because they've sort of lost the money, but it's actually errors in the underlying assessments, and Stephen Timms and the Select Committee have obviously addressed it. Paul, I mean, these numbers are huge, and I mean, the CMS, I read out their statement, they're trying to make improvements, but for example, yourself, how often do you hear about it from constituents or colleagues' constituents as an issue?
I do hear about this, unfortunately, too often. And often, actually, I was speaking to my office team this morning, knowing that I was coming on to talk about this. And what they were saying to me as they were dealing with it on the day-to-day, that it does tend to be very slow to resolve any of these issues, which is obviously what you've just heard from Ian and Joe. And my heart goes out to them. And their families, because you can understand why this has been set up the way it's been set up. When it changed from the Child Support Agency to the Child Maintenance Service, it was there to try and speed up the process, trying to make it more efficient, which it's been doing. There's around 100,000 estimated people that are willfully not paying the right amount. But you can clearly see in these kind of examples, when it goes wrong, it goes horrendously wrong. And so government cannot afford these mistakes.
I think that's right. And I'm sure everybody's got the best of intentions, but I'm also really troubled by this fact that there's no, even if they prove the errors...
The appeal system.
This appeal system, if the Secretary of State or the people who work in the system ask for a liability order, even though there's actual proof in the court to the barristers, there's nothing they can do about it. The judge has to grant it. That surely defies natural justice, man.
I mean, I'm mindful of what the CMS said in that statement that you read out, and I'm clearly not an expert on this. This is the first time I've come across it. But if it is correct that appeals in reality can't properly be made, that is nothing short of disgraceful. And
so I'll clarify. It's section 33.4 of the 1991 Child Support Act, that if it goes to court, then the judge has to grant it.
Look, something needs to be done about this as a matter of urgency. This is not a sort of headline grabber necessarily, but the effects that it has had on people's lives are devastating, as we've seen. We have to have natural justice. Yeah. You have to have a proper right of appeal. If anyone has ever found the state up against them, that is a horrible place to be. I mean, criminals have the state up against them rightly, but then when innocent people find themselves on the wrong
and they've
end,
got the evidence,
that's really bad.
And I think, look, I'm sure there's no malintent. They want to do this properly, but it's taking too much time. And look, I'll read out again the DWP's statement on this. They said that child maintenance payments help around 160,000 children out of poverty in the average year, and they continue to improve the CMS through automating simple processes and spending more time with vulnerable customers. That is a critical point. I'll carry on reading, but I think that's a fundamental point that we need to make progress on. They then go on to say CMS payments are calculated so they're reasonable and affordable for the paying parent and decisions can be appealed. Similarly, there are appeal rights for paying parents where the CMS intends to take enforcement action. Well, I've seen it, I've read the cases in court. Section 33.4 of the 1991 Child Support Act actually goes beyond that statement from the DWP. I'm going to keep abreast of it. Keep your thoughts and views coming in on this, folks. I've got shows next week. We'll come back to this issue. It's really important. We've got to try and make progress finally.
No one is saying that child support isn't critical.
Exactly.
Of course it is. Imagine a child's life without it.
And the vast majority of cases are probably organised and
it is
paid
about
properly.
sorting it out where there is an error that's gone wrong, so that we don't live in an infernal, interminable bureaucracy, but it can be sorted out quickly and efficiently.
It should be better data exchange within government. It's only 2 years ago that HMRC actually started to tell the CMS when people left full-time education. If any of your viewers are affected, please do get in touch with their MP or Citizens
That's
Advice
really
Bureau.
important to get in touch, folks. If you, families, friends you know of, we've got to try and make progress on this vital issue, because otherwise it can end in absolute tragedy, as we heard there earlier from Ian and Joe. Now, to